Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Northport, A View from Here. My name is Gene Matthews and I will not be your host today, but rather I will be your guest. Your host today will be Bob Tunis, who is the Economic Development Manager for the City of Northport. And he's here to grill me on economic development and some of my views and ideas about the world. So here we are, Bob. Welcome, and ask your first question.
Well, I hope it's not too traumatic for you to be on the brunt of all these questions.
I get nervous when I'm in front of a camera.
Exactly. Now, people probably don't know this, but you just came back from Japan, and you've been doing a lot of activities in Japan for the past few years, and you're actually at the point now of developing some relationships between Florida companies and hopefully Northport companies in Japan. So why don't we start off? We only have half an hour, so I don't want to go back too far, but let's go back and say, how did you first get involved in Japan?
Well, I think we have to go back about 50 years because right after the Korean War, at the end of the Korean War, they took the company I was stationed in Korea and sent us to Japan. And I lived there just outside of Kyoto for 18 months, and I developed a real interest in Japan and things Japanese. I studied the language while I was there. I played ice hockey while I was there. I taught English in the American Culture Center when I was there. And when I returned to the States, I attended Georgetown University and studied Japanese again for a short while. My work during the 60s was with an international company, and we dealt quite a bit with Japan, and that was my beat, and even traveled there at that time as a very young man. So I always had an interest in Japan, and when I finally retired about 4 or 5 years ago, I went back to school, started up at USF in Tampa, and started studying Japanese. And you know, through all the time I've been in Northport, though, I've been involved in economic development in one sense or another, whether it's building my own business or working through the chamber after it was formed, and now with the Economic Development Council. So there in itself is where my interest and my participation in Japan started.
Okay. So from what I know about Japan, relationships are key. So what are some of the longer relationships you have? Do you have sort of key people that you've been dealing with for the past few years?
Well, for the past few years, mainly because I've been out of circulation for so many years, since the 60s, the late 60s, in the Japanese market, let's say, my effort has been in networking and building those relationships. The Japanese do have very strict protocol when it comes to forming relationships and building trust and everything else. And one of those is longevity of knowing you and working with you and being with you. And I finally, at this point, after 3 trips there, are feeling the results of this. I can't say that we can point any one finger at any one dollar that ever came to America or that we sent to Japan because of my efforts, but I believe that it's starting to pay off now.
So what is the Japanese attitude now? Because we all know back in the 80s there was a major push of Japanese investment in the United States. Then they pulled back when they had the recession. I was going to say 10 years ago, now 15 years ago. Are they ready now to start looking at the U.S. market again?
Well, I think Japan has always been restrictive in its trade policy towards the United States. Even back in the 50s and 60s, immediately following the war for that matter, they had huge tariffs and such on American goods. If you were to buy an automobile in America and ship it to Japan, if it cost $10,000, there'd be a $10,000 tax on top of it. They would just about double the tax. So as a result, it hindered the growth of American business in Japan. They also had very restrictive policies about ownership of Japanese companies and also about developing American companies within the country of Japan. Those things are starting to fade, and I think it's as a result of the bubble that they were under that was so, I mean, it was a huge bubble where they were just making money hands over fist. They were the economic giant in the world at that time. They were buying American property and European property, Canadian property, and then that bubble burst, and they had to come up with new paradigms, new ways of thinking, and part of that was, of course, how to interact on a more congenial basis, if you will, with the rest of the world. Because with the World Trade Organization, the banking organizations, and free trade being issues of great importance to a country like America, Japan had to start playing in the same ball field. And I think that they are now actively seeking American participation over in their country, and they're still and they're bringing more and more plants, if you will, manufacturing and assembly plants into the United States, which is something they never did before. Toyota is a big, is a prime example of the thousands and thousands of jobs that they have generated within the South.
Now, are they looking for strict investment here? Are they looking for partners? Or are they looking for places to sell their goods?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of all three. They are aggressive businessmen. Most Asiatics are. The Chinese are, the Koreans, Taiwanese. They're very aggressive as businessmen no matter where they go. They just seem to have that innate quality built into them. They want to do business and they want to do good business. And I think that they want to invest money here. Of course, they want to return. And they're willing now to, as I say, put up plants. At first they put up the plants, but they brought all the material from Japan to the U.S. Now they're manufacturing those same parts to a greater degree here in America. And Hyundai is doing it in Korea. So it's kind of becoming the trend. They want to do all aspects of business. They want to move in, they want us to move there and supply things that they can't supply or don't supply, goods and services.
Can you give me an idea if you know of any American companies that have been active in Japan lately? Something that's new?
Well, not from this area. I really can't. Your major international corporations, of course, are in there. The insurance companies are in there, and your communications companies and corporations. They're all very active within Japan. They have subsidiaries there. Some are small, and some are quite large. And the Japanese and the Korean governments do keep a close watch, or they really monitor the companies so they don't become too powerful, I believe, where it's going to create a monopoly for them and be detrimental to Japanese business. Their goal, the Japanese goal, is to not jeopardize their own internal business and and hurt their labor force, because they need to keep their people working too over there.
I think Ford was a big investor in Mazda at one time.
I'm not sure right now. I haven't studied that aspect of Japan at this point. My interest is more on a local basis, where I can reach out and touch a corporation here that may need to import something, may have something to import to Japan or Korea or even China for that matter, and try to bring industrial development to Sarasota County, Northport, Sarasota County. We have only one Japanese company here now, and they manufacture bandages such as Band-Aids and such, and that's Aso Corporation. They're located up here in
Do they have Japanese
Sarasota.
executives who are present here, or is it entirely local?
Well, most of the executives that I know are American. They do have Japanese management teams here also.
So there is a potential. I mean, even though you think that Sarasota is about as far from Japan as you can get, there is things that could be done.
Oh, absolutely, and we're getting a signal for the break, so I don't know whether I have to do it as.
Why don't we put you in charge of that?
Okay, all right. We'll be back in a moment.
Okay, thanks.
Have you seen Northport lately? Take a minute and take a look.
We really do enjoy nature, and we found it all here, right in our own backyard. Love fishing and boating on the Mayaka. You never know what you might see out there. We toured the whole state of Florida and found that Northport had everything that we wanted.
There's a lot of natural beauty, and there's a lot of wildlife here. I love the open spaces, and I love the quiet.
If you're intrigued by what you just saw, pay us a visit and you'll see a lot more.
Welcome back to Northport, a view from here. I'm once again going to turn over the questioning to Bob Tunis, our Economic Development Manager.
Great.
Bob?
Okay, well, let's talk about the trip you just got back from. How did that come about?
Well, maybe I have to digress a little bit again. Remember I said when I retired I started going back to school and studying Japanese and things Japanese. And I became associated with the Southeast United States USA Japan Association. And what this is, it's a group of 6 southern states that have formed an alliance through the states to affect business between Japan and the United States. Not only business, but also cultural events and things of that nature. And every year they have an annual meeting. Every other year it's in Japan, and every other year it's held at a state, one of the 6 states here in the United States. Last year it was in Atlanta, so we went to Atlanta for the annual, and the year before that it was in Osaka. This year it's going to be in Tokyo, so I'll be going to Tokyo again in the fall. And but I just came back from a trip to Nagoya, Japan. For years now, the U.S. government has not participated in World's Fairs or World Expositions as they're known today. I remember years ago when I was a kid, we went to the World's Fair down in Flushing, New York. Well, they don't participate in those anymore. But because Japan is such a strong trading partner with the United States, and our desire to do good and wonderful things with the country of Japan, they decided that they would go to Nagoya and participate in this particular exposition. And it was all done through private corporate sponsors that paid for all this, and there's no government money in this particular event. Had a theme about Benjamin Franklin and the ingenuity of Benjamin Franklin, the Wright brothers, and they had the moon rover and a whole lot of very interesting things there. The theme of the Nagoya Expo was green. In other words, it was all on conservation, how to build fuel-efficient cars, how to preserve the environment, and it was a very good exposition. I just wish I had more time where I could have seen a lot more. Our duties over there were, and they were somewhat duties, were for goodwill ambassadors for the United States, and we went around and visited other countries within the expo and saw their exhibits and spoke with their people. And then on our last day there, which was a Wednesday, we had a business meeting of about 100 Japanese business people, and there the state of Florida and our organization put on call it a sales pitch, if you will, about the state of Florida, the advantages to do business here, the climate, the people, the opportunities, and what we do between each other today, which is like a $5 billion business exchange between the two, between the country and the state of Florida. So it's a major portion of our.
So that's got to be like about the 4th or 5th largest trading partner of Florida.
Well, in Florida, Japan is about the 2nd or the 3rd. Unfortunately, it's still the balance is we import more than we export. But certainly we had representatives there from the citrus industry that imports all our citrus, which was a very important person to have there, and we treated them as royally as we could. Ate more Japanese food in those few days I was there than I did in probably all the years I was there.
Lots of toast, I assume.
No toast.
Okay.
It was very friendly. It wasn't at night that we were with all the Japanese businessmen, but we were constantly in contact with them, constantly networking with them, and that's what you need to build the trust and the alliance of the Japanese.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's any plans for some of the Japanese to come over here who you met?
Well, next year and this is what, 1900, listen to
Yeah.
me, 2000, next year, 2006, the annual meeting will be in Orlando. So there's going to be some 700 people that attend this particular convention, and generally it's half and half, half from Japan and half from the U.S. And along with the U.S.-Japan Association, there's also a U.S.-Korea Association and a U.S.-China Association. And they follow similar patterns of trying to develop business. I'm not involved in those two, and strictly with Japan at this point.
Now, if a local company wanted to get involved, could they sponsor an event, sponsor a reception, or have some sort of
Well,
involvement?
I think that they certainly can be a sponsor for this, because that's what pays for these things. Toshiba Corporation in Japan, when we go there, they are massive sponsors. So is Toyota, and without their assistance or underwriting, if you will, I'm sure that a lot of things would not be accomplished or done at these particular events.
Let's talk about Nagoya, because first of all, where is Nagoya?
Nagoya is between Osaka and Tokyo, and there's a very large dynamics going on there. Osaka has always been the manufacturing heart of Japan, and for financial, it's been Tokyo. Okay, but now Nagoya, which is located centrally between the two spots, with the advent of Toyota moving their main offices, corporate offices, all to the Nagoya area, right around the Nagoya station. They're in the process of building those buildings now. The Osaka area is starting to lose some of that manufacturing that they once had because of that the change in corporate headquarters of the Toyota Corporation. But Nagoya is in Aichi Prefecture, which is like a state, and is heavily industrialized now. But it's kind of the gateways to the Japanese Alps. You want to go over to the other coast of Japan. You'll see all the original old villages that the way they were 500, 600, 700 years ago, like you see in the movies.
Right.
And that's where they are, all over there. So it's a very interesting place, and centrally located within Japan.
What I've noticed is all of a sudden there's nonstop flights going to Nagoya from the United States, where I don't notice it before.
Well, I think they've been going on for a few years, but not to the degree they are now. They've just finished, for this expo, as a matter of fact, they've just finished that airport, and it was built out in the harbor. And as the Osaka airport, Kansai airport is also, they do it out in the harbors, and Hong Kong is the same way, and I guess that's the only place they have the flat land, or they can generate the flat land, is out into the harbors. And that's another tremendous asset in developing business. They also built these maglev trains from the airport over to the expo and into Nagoya, and all kinds of fuel-efficient ways of moving people around were devised just for this expo.
Yes. That's quite something.
Yeah, it is quite an operation. And with that, we'll be back in a moment.
Great.
There's a rumor that small-town America has all but disappeared.
Life is great, Northport.
Northport is the last Mohican. This is the place. This is going to be the last undeveloped region. The city government itself is so pro-growth, and it's just like everything is in the right place at the right time for Northport. They're very open-minded, they're very honest, and they're very fair.
Disappeared? You've just seen evidence to the contrary. We call it Northport.
Welcome back to the final segment of Northport, A View from here. And once again, I'll turn you over to Bob Tunis. Bob?
Let me start off with an anecdote that I've never told you this before.
Okay. This is, I thought I was going to be...
No, I just, we've heard enough from you, so we're going to hear from me for a
All
second.
right, that's good.
In a previous life, I worked for the Alberta government. And about 8 years ago, we were lobbying for Calgary to be the city for the 2005 World's Fair. And we were in Monaco at the same time that Nagoya was doing its lobbying. And I have to say, they outclassed us completely. Toyota was so powerful. They had every member of the delegation lobbied. Even though we had Alberta flags all over the city, they had Japanese flags, which were twice as big as our flags. And in the end, they ended up getting the selection and turned out to be quite successful. So let's go into a little bit more about
Toyota really is a powerful force, not only in the country but in the world. I mean, you can see how it's starting to dominate the American scene as far as an American manufacturer. I guess they're putting the sweats to General Motors as being number one. But at the expo, they had a tremendous show there, and they used robots. And these robots walked, they danced, they played musical instruments.
I heard that.
They just did everything. It was just amazing, amazing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I saw the opening of the show, and I saw those. I was going to ask you about the robots.
Oh yeah, they were absolutely superb. I took a picture, and I was told politely not to take any more.
Oh really?
Yes.
Intellectual property, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about the transportation system there. I was talking about the fact that in Europe and Asia, one of the advantages is that you can take a train directly from an airport to anywhere in the country, where here you have to take a bus into the city and then find some other transportation.
Yeah, well, at some of the airports you have to take buses also, but there's generally rail at most of them. I know at Kansai there is, that's Osaka Airport, out at Nagoya there is, and in Tokyo there is, but there's also buses also, which if you're not going out into rush hour time, it's probably easier with your luggage and everything to go on the buses, because you don't have to lug them through trains, and there may not be room on the trains, and so it can be a problem. But their overall transportation situation is just superb. I mean, you can travel from one end to the other of Japan on the main island of Honshu, especially within hours, 3-4 hours from one end to the other, and at a nominal cost, less than it would cost you to fly here an equal amount of distance. And as you said, there's convenience of transportation right from even from the rail stations. Within the rail stations, the main rail stations, they have all types of local subways and overheads and buses, and there's always cab, and there's always your legs to get you around.
Now, do you speak enough Japanese you can ask for directions and find your way around?
I speak enough that I can get in trouble, and sometimes I speak enough out of desperation, but I try. It's a work in progress. I can't sit down and speak as fluently as you and I are speaking now in English, but generally if I need to get an idea across or something, I can do it.
Because one of the things I noticed when I was in Japan, before I went, I was under the assumption that nearly all Japanese spoke English, and it was relatively easy to ask for directions. But really, outside of the interface level of the tourist people, it isn't that much fluency.
Well, if you were a language student, you would understand this. The amount that they can say or understand is high. However, they don't know how to speak it. They know how to read it, but to say the same words, they just can't, they're not accustomed to doing that. And as I'm not accustomed to doing it either, I can say more in Japanese than I can understand, because I don't hear it all the time. So it's just a difficulty of learning languages. They take 4 and 5 years of English language in during their school life, and a lot of them are very, very good. Most of them are just bashful.
And certainly in your business life, virtually everyone you would deal at a major company would speak fluent English.
Yes, or they would have very fluid speaking English people there. And also when we're there, we have Enterprise Florida representatives there, and they're native Japanese, but they're certainly bilingual, and they have a great deal of respect shown them by the Japanese businesses. And it's just, again, it's a question of trust, respect, and you have to work at that. You can't take it for granted.
Exactly.
And you have to learn how they want to do business, and that's in a slow, easy way, and no pressure, if you can work within their system, you stand a good chance of being successful in dealing with them.
So it could take 4 or 5 years before you have a substantive agreement.
Oh, absolutely. You may have the best product in the world and a product that they really need, but it's going to take you a while, and that could be any length of time before acceptance and contract signing takes place. It's just a process.
And the key is meeting people, because it's one thing to do things by fax and email.
The most important thing that you can do with Japanese is to meet them face to face. They love to exchange business cards, and they save them all. And if you don't keep an appointment, that's like shooting yourself in the foot. And so they're very, how shall I say it, religious about their protocol and what they expect from not only themselves, but from others.
Yeah. So I assume you had your business cards printed in Japanese on one side?
Yes,
and
I
English on
have.
the other.
I have some in my daytimer right now. And I go there under the auspices of economic development. And since I sit on the board of the Sarasota County Economic Development Committee, I'm there on, not at their behest, but I am there representing them because they have a much larger role in the overall picture than the city of Northport at this point. So it's more prestigious, if you will, to be going under Sarasota County as versus the city, which is
Well, and like in
virtually
anything,
unknown.
they may actually have heard the name Sarasota. Well, I doubt they've heard the name Northport in Japan.
Right.
So it gives more credibility.
And you'd be surprised. A lot of them have. A lot of them have visited us. They like
we're
our
not-
beaches.
Yeah, we're not that far from Disney World. I'm
Right.
sure they've all heard of Disney World.
Okay.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps?
Well, the next steps to continue the networking process, which will be in October. I mean, I've been to meet the Japanese ambassador last week down in Miami. Miami is a very large Japanese contingent. That's where their consulate is down there. And try to see if we can't pull together some kind of meeting or committee or whatever to see how we can work with existing business within Sarasota County and Northport that may have, and they don't realize it, an interest in selling to Japan, buying from Japan, of having co-ventures or move their business to Japan or a part of it. So it's a never-ending process, but networking is the key.
And the advantage of working with you or one of these groups is that a lot of the logistics are taken care of. You don't have to establish your initial contacts. You don't have to establish itineraries. You go along with the group, and there you meet people for the first time, and then just to develop your own network.
Right, and most of the Japanese companies and even the American companies bring large volumes of material that, in fact, I think I gave you some the other day of their products and their services. So again, networking is the key. Keeping constant contact, building friendships. I have some friends that live in Japan, and when I was there last time, we spent the weekend before the exposition to going around Tokyo and just having a good old time, eating a lot of fancy food and walking my fool legs off.
Well, next time, make sure you invite me along, because I miss all these great trips. You see.
I wish I could.
Exactly.
What's your budget?
Well, I get as far as
discuss
Orlando
that?
on my budget, I think.
You probably have about 30 seconds to complain about it, and we don't even have that. I get the signal. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me ramble on for the past 30 minutes, and we'll see you again